Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, State of the Nation, number 13. So we have been doing these since the outbreak last year. So this is now into its 13th edition. And this time we're going to talk on the topic of endless aisle. As always, if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A session. The session will be recorded, so if you do need to leave early, you'll be able to catch it later on the Retail Doctor Group YouTube channel, and we'll also send around the links. We've also got a white paper that we'll share with you after the session, and should you so desire, it will also be recorded into a podcast, so you can listen on the Retail Doctor Group podcast channel on Spotify, iTunes, or Android. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speakers today. So firstly, I will pass to Brian Walker, CEO and founder of Retail Doctor Group, to give us a slight introduction.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks, Anastasia. Appreciate that. We are delighted to bring this event to you this morning, certainly as retail moves increasingly into this space of building ecosystems, building omnichannel, interchangeable term, and we look very much at what are the capabilities as retailers need to really think about aspects such as click and collect, and in this case, endless aisle, and building out the omni-channel offer that we build out for our clients. So I'm delighted this morning to welcome Matthew Craig, Director of Mindarc, one of our partners, significant partner for us in the building of omni-channel retail platforms and networks for our clients. And Matt and I also had the pleasure of click and collect session where we explored that, and this is, if you like, the next chapter. Welcoming also Paul Erskine, who's the head of digital and data insights for Strandbags, and also brings a consummate experience with NECA brands. Paul has some great insights into the experience of building endless aisle or virtual shelf and its importance. And one of the things we want to really pick up on today is how value accreting endless aisle is for a retailer, how critical it is, and of course, what are some of the key learnings. So supporting Paul in that endeavor will be Jasper, who's the strategic partner at APAC for Gorgias, and again, digital and data expert, and really building and linking to the physicality of retail with, of course, the digital integrated platforms. So this morning, we'll hear from each of the gentlemen, and then we'll bring it together in a panel session. So looking forward, and thanks again for your involvement today.
Okay, so I think we'll maybe just start with setting the scene a little bit as to why it's so important. And recently, within our Insights division, we ran some consumer research to really look at what are consumers doing at the moment and what do we expect them to continue doing moving forward as we see the landscape go back to a more normal situation. So when we were talking about the digital customer journey and really mapping out that customer journey, what we saw is 35% of consumers will leave a store and purchase from a competitor if a product is out of stock. So it's really showing the importance that all these systems really do talk to each other, and they've got that ability for the consumer to have the right products at the right time in the right place. We can see that 44% will check online while they're in the store and then go and purchase there. They're less likely to actually approach the staff and ask if the product's in stock. So the customer's going to be able to see that product and stock availability while they are in the store. 31% will ask a staff member and get it shipped to the nearest store, and 18% will ask a staff member and then get it delivered to their home. So we're seeing a very different customer behavior, and this will vary obviously by sector and particularly by brand. But I think the key thing of importance here is how the customer will really try and self-find the products and really do it a lot themselves on that mobile device.
One of the catalysts for the endless aisle work is really looking at this integrated inventory position and the importance of the way that customers shop retail. And as Anastasia points out from our retail and consumer study, we are absolutely seeing digital experiences, I would say, almost dictating customer behavior now, certainly moving from influencer to dictator. And I think, Anastasia, some really interesting points that you make here about the way that the digital experience is absolutely a driver of consumer behavior.
Very much so. I think this is one of the things we were looking at is what is that digital customer journey? And even in the physical environment, how do they interact? And what is this new consumer looking for? And we can see 32%, so that's almost a third of consumers, do want digital screens in store to check product availability and pricing. So something we will touch on today. 17% are influenced by augmented reality. So this is a really interesting part of that digital journey about how consumers can try the products in their own home, look at what it would look like on themselves, look at what it would look like in their home, on their walls, or even as much as try a car out in augmented reality before purchase. We've seen the use of magic mirrors to help consumers try on products, and even interested in magic mirrors to help them order products, get product reviews and product information while they're in the fitting room stage. And we can see that 10% influenced by voice-activated robot sales. So we really are starting to see some of these digital offers come into the everyday journey of the customer. What is very interesting though is when we then split that into our demographic groups, we can really see that our younger, 18 to 44, are really significantly more interested. So we're going to see that wave of the digital interaction in store really pick up as these younger consumers. One of the comments we always used to make was, by 2020, millennials will be the largest spending demographic. Well, that's been and gone. So now we know that that younger consumer, our millennial, which is now a 25 to 38 consumer, they are our largest spending demographic, and they really are interested in this digital journey, augmented reality, magic mirrors. So it's how we really cater for that consumer. But firstly, understanding who is our consumers and looking at that gap.
So the concept of endless aisle, this ability to create a virtual shelf, that is a range of inventory that wouldn't be carried in a physical store and opens up a breadth for a pure play operation as well. So when we start to talk about endless aisle and linking it to the digital journey, one of the questions really starts to come out about what is the role of brand, what is the role of physical space, and we'll discuss some of these aspects as well with the gentleman today. So high level, what are the benefits of implementing endless aisle? Well, of course, this idea of certainly, if I go back one slide, back, Anastasia slide, yeah, it certainly resolves the problem of this concept of out of stock, the physicality of it. Changes in many cases the working capital model, because if we have a drop ship type model, the retailer model of actually buying inventory, particularly creating the cash flow implications of that, can somewhat be relieved by the fact that they're just passing the product through. And often it's a seamless interaction from supplier to customer. Expansion of inventory without increasing floor space. I know Paul will touch on this. Not always the case, certainly an adjunct to the big showroom type offer. In many cases known and seen to drive higher average transaction value, particularly in the physical space where we think about the ability to showroom, to drive up other benefits of merchandise assortment. But that too becomes somewhat debatable as we move more into an augmented reality type environment. And there's our cross and upsell opportunities and the benefits. And so conversely, what are some of the challenges? Well, as the gentleman will talk about, the ability to have good business information system architecture, real-time inventory updates, real-time inventory visibility across suppliers, your own stock levels, and so forth, and of course, movement through the physical stores and online. The ability to staff, particularly in the physical environment, to be able to use the endless aisle benefits and empower staff to be able to do that. Of course, we need to have good centralized ordering processes. And as we touched on, tracking third-party supplier inventory and having those relationships are key to a universal platform of endless aisle. So what are the implications as we talk through this? It's probably the really first tangible evidence of the need to have an integrated retail ecosystem, and we'll talk to Paul about that. Certainly realignment of physical stores, online, the distribution model, the omnichannel footprint, if you like. Certainly around the rise of what we would say the rise of brand, and increasingly, and you've heard us say, channels will become less of the sort of silo effect, if you like, and it'll be much more about the brand and how I choose to buy into the brand. And we're seeing that already. And of course, the capital expenditure required for improving business information systems. So we've looked with some of our clients, and we've looked at some examples of retailers implementing endless aisle. Here's our friends at Sephora. I know Paul, with his Mecca background, is well positioned to touch on this. But here's Sephora with their virtual artist displaying a shoppable gallery of products. So where shoppers can virtually try on more than 90 false lashes and lip shade and purchase the products with the help of the chatbot. None of the stock carried in store, absolutely virtual. A nice example of endless aisle. Q Clothing, a very progressive fashion retailer here in Australia, launched endless aisle in 2018. And during the first week, they reported 130% increase in sales, 90% more inventory. And I think that really reads as 90% more inventory availability and width, and a 70% increase in conversions. So staggering number and a very short ROI on the investment. This is from our US partners of the Ebeltoft Group, and with thanks to them. Here's Walmart in Texas. And so what it does through its endless aisle, or its kiosk in store with an online range, enabled shoppers to choose from a list of products it currently sells and place an order on the spot. And of course, it's able to suggest best sellers by prompting users to answer a selection of questions. And that takes us into the world of AI, artificial intelligence, and predictive reasoning and predictive selling. And so it's the natural companion of endless aisle. So I think we'll pass to some of the other experts in the room. And I think Anastasia will lead off with.
We'll welcome Paul next to the floor. So Paul Erskine, Head of Digital and Data from Strandbags. So thank you, Paul. Thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Brian. So yeah, as Brian has mentioned, what is endless aisle and what is endless aisle in retail at the moment? So it's the ability to give customers access to the full range of products. So when a customer comes into store, they still want to come to stores. They still want that immersive experience, but when they're in store, they want to experience the full brand experience. They want to see all the products. They want to be able to find out information. They want it quickly. You're obviously limited by the amount of space that you have in a store. So how do you then augment that? So the way to do that is obviously bringing in digital screens, bringing in kiosk type models, so that when the customer's in the store, it doesn't matter necessarily the size of the store. If you're able to provide an experience that really ticks the box for them, then I think it's going to really help with customer retention, customer satisfaction. Everyone probably knows the experience. You look online, you see a product, okay, I'm going to go to the store, have a look. If it's not there, you're immediately disappointed. So I think being ready for that, so being ready for the fact that it may be out of stock in store, you may not actually range it in store. So being prepared for that to engage the customer. Obviously, if you've got a lot of customers coming in, you need a lot of staff. So the way to complement that is having that digital technology to complement the experience. I think if done well, then you'll really engage the customers, bring them into the experience, and the potential is unlimited. So if you get that experience working well, you can add products in the back end without actually having to physically bring them into store. So you can potentially move towards a marketplace type model where the range of products you're selling is unlimited. So yeah, I think that's quite exciting. So in terms of delivery, so the key thing is to make the experience engaging for the customer. So as Brian mentioned, if you have a screen where you can engage, they ask you questions, it's fun to use, and it gives you what you need in the right format, I think that's number one, or else people just won't use it. Technical challenges, so like any piece of work that involves people or technology, it's never simple. So I think integrating e-commerce systems, point of sale, merchandising systems I think is one of the big challenges. For me, I think iterative delivery is the key to that. So you know potentially where you want to be in the future, like in a year or two. But I think starting off now with what can you do right now to improve that experience? What is the roadmap? How can you deliver change iteratively? So you learn as you deliver a change, you learn how that went, you measure it. As part of that, you need good data insights. So in terms of measuring how well those in-store screens are doing, how customers are engaging with them, what's gone well, what's not gone well. From what I've seen at Mecca and now at Strandbags, good data is key to that. And that helps to drive decision making. And also you need across departments. So generally, historically, you've had retail get certain targets, e-commerce will get certain targets. So now you're looking at a blended target that it doesn't matter what channel customers are shopping in. The experience is cross-functional, and that key to that is training, engaging teams, and getting people working together. And also the product range. So looking at what you're going to have in store, how does that complement what you've got online? So you give the customer the best experience of the range in store without having to have a massive footprint. Yeah, my view on the future of endless aisle, I think, as Brian mentioned, I think the opportunities are massive. You've got augmented reality, you've got personalization. So I think from what I've seen at Strandbags with the new store concept at Chadstone and Blacktown, they're really going for that immersive experience. We have an in-store kiosk where customers can browse the range, look at different products, and that was developed in-house by Nathan Toussaint and the IT team. So again, a great example of that iterative development. AI and personalization. So with machine learning, with say services that Amazon provide, there's a real opportunity to learn what the customer has done in the past and recommend products to them. And that can really, I think there's a real opportunity to use that in store. Again, if staff are busy serving someone and you want some recommendations, I think building in machine learning into that is definitely very valuable. And again, I think the key is obviously screens. The bigger, the better, the more features you've got. We talked about augmented reality, like trying on clothes. Personally, if I go shopping, one of the big things that puts me off is having to go back and forth to the changing room. So if you're able to look at how things look without actually going through that multiple times, I think that definitely helps. And remote store browsing. So I saw during COVID where flipping that a little bit, where customers from home were able to engage with store hosts at Mecca, ask about products, get shown around the store, but from the comfort of your own home. And obviously in COVID times, I think that's even more important. And then transacting, being able to go into store, find what you want quickly, really get an immersive experience, and then be able to purchase, whether that's delivered to store, sent to your home, I think, to suit the customer needs, I think is key. So yeah, in summary, I think endless sales are definitely a massive lever for any retailer going forward into the future. And again, just building that out iteratively, I think is the key. Starting with step one, learn from it, go to step two. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thanks, Paul. That was a really good sort of insights into how you sort of been building it at Strandbags and at Mecca. I'm looking forward to asking you some questions in the Q&A session shortly. Thank you. So we will now move to Jasper Koolen from Gorgias. Jasper, if you want to talk us through from your take on digital data and the customer service and really customer journey side of endless aisle.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for giving me the chance to speak today. Really excited to be here. Today I'll be focusing on the omnichannel approach through customer service. And to quickly introduce myself, my name is Jasper. I'm the Strategic Partner Manager here at APAC, here in APAC for Gorgias. And for those who are unfamiliar with Gorgias, we are the #1 help desk platform for e-commerce brands. So if we just go to the next slide. We work with about 6,000 brands globally. And the real value behind using a platform like Gorgias is to increase your customer service processes and workflows for an online customer service team, which ultimately results in a better experience for the consumer online, right? So the concept of endless aisle and omnichannel, it's obviously blurring the lines between your physical retail stores and your online digital environment. And so with that, you're giving your consumer the chance to essentially shop from anywhere. And with that comes the responsibility of being everywhere from a customer service perspective, right? So that means Facebook, Instagram, they're massive channels of engagements for your consumers, as well as the traditional channels of phone calls and emails. And it's important to be across all of those. So we see that, again, that the lines between offline and online are blurring. So 50% of your consumers may engage with you on different channels online. So again, that's your social media channels as well. Particularly for younger consumers, no surprises there. They tend to be active on social media, right? So if you're giving your consumer the opportunity to be to purchase online and to blur that line between physical and digital, the catch is that you've got to be there, right? That's the bottom line. So we see that responding, for example, to ads online can have the same effect as increasing your sales and ad effectiveness on social media. And obviously brands are spending a lot of money on social media advertising. So, you know, this is an easy win essentially, to be present on those channels. Second is to personalize the shopping experience online. Big, you know, value point of your physical retail store traditionally is obviously it's a personal shopping experience. You've got someone who's able to assist you, someone who's able to understand what you're looking for, and really that shouldn't be any different in a virtual environment. So what we see is if you can provide that online personal shopping experience, that does result in repeat purchases. It drives your sales, it increases conversion, which is obviously massive. And with that personalization, you can provide particular product recommendations, cart abandonment emails that are specific to particular consumers. And again, this results in loyal customers, and we know that loyal customers are approximately 9 times more likely to convert compared to a first-time shopper. So again, that personalized shopping experience is very, very important, and you want to try and replicate that digitally. The way we do that, for example, here at Gorgias, is we integrate really nicely with platforms like Shopify, BigCommerce, and Magento, so that when consumers do reach out to you via, for example, Instagram or Facebook or email, we're able to display some really accurate data points from those e-commerce channels. So I can see straight away, okay, Michelle here, she's purchased from us before. These are her previous orders. She spent this much money. So I can provide that personalized response, right? Finally, I think that the beauty of going digital is that you have the opportunity to really automate, right? Some things that you might not be able to automate traditionally in your traditional brick and mortar store. And so what we do here at Gorgias, we use machine learning to do that. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We see that in customer service, particularly online, the engagement you have with your consumers are very different than what you see in your physical retail stores, right? Online shopping, it's all about where is my order. Approximately 40% of total engagements are where is my order, when can I expect my delivery, what's going on, right? That's that number one inquiry that people have, and you simply don't see that in your physical retail stores. And so that's a time-consuming question. It can be frustrating for your customer service team. It can be perhaps annoying, right? Having to answer that same question every single day. So the ability to automate those inquiries, again, if you can automate 40% of those, you're saving yourself a chunk of time, right? So that's a real benefit of going digital, which you simply wouldn't see in your physical stores. Here at Gorgias, we use machine learning to detect the intent of what a customer is asking for. So again, let's say someone sends an Instagram message or a Facebook engagement or an email, the Gorgias machine learning can actually identify what the customer is asking for and then send out an automatic response, which feels so personal and so accurate to that specific consumer, because we can display Shopify data points, that the consumer doesn't realize that this is an automatic engagement, right? And that's a real benefit of going digital, which you wouldn't get in the physical store. So another example we see on social media is prioritizing the type of engagements that you receive. So some brands that do really well digitally may have hundreds, or if not thousands, of comments on a Facebook post, whether that's an ad post or maybe a promotion that they're running. The last thing you want to do is go through each and every one of those comments, right? And so using machine learning and automation to maybe identify those engagements that are revenue generating, that maybe are negative comments, so that you can identify those first. So it's a really good way of prioritizing how you operate online. So that's a little bit of my insight on bridging the gap between your physical stores going to e-commerce with the customer service perspective. For those that are interested in checking out Gorgias, if you mention retail doctor group, you'll receive your second and your third month free. So we'd love to have a chat to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Jasper, and thanks for that great offer for retail doctor group community. So great insight to how we can use that automation on that customer journey. And one of the things I was talking about yesterday is, yeah, very much customers looking for personalization. I think around 50% increasing significantly for that younger consumer wanting that personalized journey. So it's really important for retailers to think about.
It's certainly a very key part of the endless aisle strategy, be it in the case that Jasper talks about, very much around that online play, be it very much in that omni-channel play that Paul talks about. And I think, Matt, you'll certainly bring to the table now some of the more technical aspects of how to implement endless aisle as a retailer, and looking forward.
Yeah, thanks, Anastasia and Brian. Yeah, definitely a very different perspective maybe to what Paul and Jasper bring to the table, which is really cool. And it was really good to hear all the insights they had to offer, I guess. And I think just to kick things off, I think everyone obviously is really feeling that I guess fast-paced, accelerating change when it comes to looking at the digital channels available for retail. I personally believe it's an evolution of retail, and it's obviously occurring faster than ever, but it's not just a response to obviously the COVID-19 impact to physical retail. I think it's actually where the future of commerce is going to head. And I think my perspective is going to be very much about the technology behind that, what some good technologies out there are actually doing to help the retailer or the merchants do what they need to do. Cool. So I guess just some things we're seeing in the market. At Mindarc, we obviously work with a lot of different merchants and retailers and see what people are really looking to try to achieve, what projects they're trying to invest in. And some of the things we're obviously seeing, the first one's very obvious, I think, for a lot of us, is looking at activating alternative channels outside of the traditional in-store channel. So that's something we're all seeing already. There's been an interesting transformation from being just a B2B type of business to trying to become D2C as well, or direct to consumer. There's been definitely a surge in interest in creating marketplaces. So, we've seen some groups of brands or, companies that own multiple brands trying to create their own marketplace experience. And I think it's kind of mimicking some of the other digital giants out there, like, the Amazons and whatnot of the world, creating marketplaces and success off the back of that. And then from a consumer side of things, purposeful consumption is becoming a big thing as well. Buying from the retailers or the brands that you align with, and that could be from a sustainability perspective, or that they're offering the right type of product. And I think with the rise of obviously social and more communication channels, communicating your brand position and your effort towards purposeful products is becoming easier and easier. So that's grabbing the attention of the consumer. And then lastly, payment flexibility. I think everyone who wants to shop wants to be able to get the payment flexibility they would like. So obviously the rise of buy now, pay later with things like Zip and Afterpay and whatnot. Those are just some of the trends, I guess. And I think selfishly, because it's my favorite platform at the moment, but how are technologies like Shopify trying to actually help? And a lot of different platforms are moving towards this direction of how do we enable the merchant to do not just that really good digital experience or sophisticated digital experience, but trying to understand, okay, what are my merchants' pain points and how are they experiencing that between enabling online and offline harmoniously. So yeah, I guess we'll dive into this a little bit. And I'm sure a lot of us have heard of what Shopify does. And traditionally, it was always seen as a platform maybe for like the smaller startup. And I think in the last 2 years, particularly in this part of the world, we've seen a lot of uptake from bigger companies, enterprise brands as well. I mean, obviously companies like where Paul is working at Strandbags, looking to invest in re-platforming into a platform like Shopify. But really, what I see is the biggest benefit that they offer is they're trying to simplify what in the past is seen as being very complex. And Paul touched on a couple of really good strategies about what's the difficult challenge about implementing something like endless aisle. And that's, I think one of the key things he said was iterative delivery. Like that is key. I think that's really going to help a merchant approach it and tackle the transformation of how they do business in an easier way, like in a almost like bite-sized type of approach where you're doing things incrementally, and then measure as you go, as was mentioned as well. So that's important. But yeah, on the screen at the moment, I guess there's just some things that you can think about, like, without an integrated point of sale, like you run into issues like, delays with inventory, so that like the integrity of that information and data it may not be as reliable as you need to serve your customer in the right way. Disjointed customer profiles, so moving away from the siloed customer profile per channel to the 360 customer view. Having like a loyalty program or a gift card type program that spans across all your channels, like how do you enable that in a good way? A general lack of reporting and consolidation for the financial side of things, like that's always a challenge when there's multiple things involved. But I mean, obviously there's ways to tackle these things, like having a centralized ERP or something along those lines, which we can talk about a bit more later. The returns process, I think, and something that Jasper was really touching on is like offering ways for your customer to interact with your store or your brand in the ways that they like. So everyone can generate an email that obviously that gets sent to the customer when you make an order, but does the customer prefer to receive that information over a social channel like Facebook? Having that enabled, and what we're talking about today in terms of endless aisle, in my opinion, is how do we make obviously from a retailer perspective, everything more accessible, but how does the customer get access to the product they want? Like we're trying to create more ways for the customer to have a better experience. And I think, thinking about all these different elements is important. And antiquated systems, yep, that's always a challenge. If you have a lot of legacy old systems that don't offer the things you need to create that integration in an easy way, or at least in a real time type of approach, then there's probably some big changes you'll have to look at for your own business. Cool. And then I guess I'll just quickly touch upon the why, like which we already kind of done that already, but why we want to have a platform that really enables this for us. We want to reduce that complexity. Like the more complexity introduced to trying to roll out a strategy, there's going to be more roadblocks, more decision makers saying, no, this is too hard. Just more risk as well. And so how do we approach it in a way where we're using the right types of technology, and also technology that enables this to happen innately without us having to hack it together with other systems to kind of make it almost work. Make more sales. Like that's really what we're trying to do. And it's kind of off the back of what I said before, where we're trying to enable customers to get access to more product in the way that they want to get access to it. And that means in this case for endless aisle, like in store, if there's particularly like products maybe that are customizable or have so many different types of variations, like having that all on the shelf is sometimes challenging from a space perspective. Could be a cost perspective as well, because you're holding all that inventory. Like just thinking of ways to make more sales, also reduce that cost footprint. And then building brand loyalty is, it's really about making sure your customers are happy with the way they shop and they like what your brand's about. And that's ties into this endless aisle concept too. Cool. Yeah, so I guess that was just a short summary of the different things you can think about. Technology-wise, I really think it's about making sure that your systems are able to do what you need them to do, and also I really like the iterative delivery approach. I think that's going to make a difference in tackling your digital transformation or your omni-channel transformation and making that something successful long-term. Just look at what short-term steps you can achieve along the way. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Very good.
Thanks for that, Matt. And so I think that what we will do is we'll then bring the everyone together for some questions. And we've got a couple of questions coming through from our audience today. So any further questions you've got for the team, shoot it into the Q&A and we'll ask the questions as we go along. But first, I think I'll pass to Brian, who had a couple of questions.
Thanks very much, Anastasia. Great session, everyone. Matt, I'm going to lead a little picking up on some of the themes about the implementation. So I'm a retailer. I've got 20 plus shops. I've got inventory coming through from my suppliers. I've got my stores. I've got my online. And I'm really interested in this thing called endless aisle and getting more synergy. Matt, from a sort of an implementation point of view, where do you advise retailers start on this journey?
Yeah, okay. So I always think understanding what endless aisle means to your customer and to you as a retailer is probably the best first step. Are you actually trying to, like, you need to be aware of what challenges you're trying to solve and making sure that those challenges can be solved by implementing a concept like endless aisle. It's, again, I don't know if it's a one size fits all type of arrangement when you're trying to come up with strategies for your brand. If you already offer the ultimate experience and you're just adding this on because it's a buzzword, not sure if that's the best decision-making process, but it's about trying to set goals and understanding what the goals are in terms of implementing endless aisle before you even start. That's even before you think about your technology and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we move into technology, I might have a point of sale system that's 5 years old. I might have a bolt-on CRM module. I might have no clue about my supplier's inventory profile. I'm trying to figure all this out. And if I've got a point of sale system that's more than 5 years old, I'm guessing that there's a revamp there just to start in terms of the systems architecture.
Yeah, definitely. And that is a good next place to start is really understanding what your business systems are, what capabilities they have already. So what does your point of sale have to offer? That in turn, what does your inventory management system look like? Are they one system already? Is that integrated in today? If not, then different next steps will dictate purely based on what you have. I think 5 years, even though it sounds like a long time, a lot of systems, if they were new 5 years ago, should have already been thinking about enabling things like APIs and stuff like that to integrate into the various systems you needed. But the big worry is when you're thinking about retailers that have systems that are 10, 20 years old, still have really old school interfaces and clearly not designed to be kind of cloud-based integrated. I think that's where the big hiccup's gonna first come, and you're gonna have to really think about what that technology transformation is gonna look like first.
Thank you. Paul, the role of endless aisle changes the relationship with suppliers potentially, and where I'm going with this is this concept of drop shipping, this concept of supplier, customer coming through your brand, placing an order through endless aisle, but in fact it's going directly to supplier. Supplier delivers to customer, and of course it's, if you like, through the channel of your brand, and so you'll sort of facilitate that, but you might not hold the stock. You might not even buy the stock at that point. Is that what drop shipping is all about? And if that's the case, is that influencing you as a retailer?
Yes, I think so. Strandbags is known as like a house of brands. So within Strandbags, you've got Flylight, you've got Guess, you've got Calvin Klein. So at the moment, we have a distribution center in Sydney. And it goes from there. And we also have 20 stores that are seen as distribution stores. And the reason for that is if we have, say, a distribution store in WA, we can then get the products to customers as quickly as possible from those 20 stores. Obviously, the key is about flexibility and streamlining the process. If we could go straight from the supplier to the customer, that then potentially saves bringing it into our DC, then sending it to store, and then sending it to customer. So I think that's the exciting thing about endless aisle and how it'll expand. And as Matt mentioned, like looking at marketplace, because I think if you are like Strandbags, a house of brands, and you're doing well and you're servicing your customer, we've got like 300 stores around the country. we've got a kiosk where people can come in. It's looking at, okay, what else can we add that we know the customer wants? And like you said, if there is a way to, because I think also we're finding a lot of customers like to come to store to get their product. It's not a case of they want it shipped to their address and that's it. They actually want to come in. We obviously sell a lot of luggage. They want to look at, when the borders open, what new luggage am I going to get? I'm going to go all out and get ready for a holiday. And even I was surprised, because looking at my old luggage compared to what they're offering, it's changed a lot since I originally got mine. So yeah, I think that's what we're excited about. It's about that. Yeah, just getting ready, enabling the customer in any way possible. But I think that streamlining processes in the back end, obviously it saves cost, and that's the aim long term.
One of the implications potentially is to start to think about different shop sizes. You know, if the fundamental assumption over the years was always around, well, I need more space in order to carry more stock, and I need to get my stock turn ratios and so forth. Well, that changes a lot of those metrics, doesn't it? And I think in your Mecca example, that's contrary to this thinking where they're building the big showrooms. But by and large, we might not need 300, 400 meter shops if we've got a virtual shelf and we've got a smaller showroom. And that changes the relationship with, well, shopping centers and all sorts of things.
Yes, I think I've seen similarities at Mecca and now at Strandbags, where they want to make the best experience possible for customers. So for example, with Mecca, they've opened the new, I think it's 4-story Gowans building in the centre of Sydney. And that's got different experiences where you can go and get a massage and go to the perfumery. Strandbags, likewise, there's a new concept that's been launched into Chadstone and Blacktown, which is much more the merchandise is presented in a really pleasing way to the customers, and there's a lot of kind of discussion around where you go on, what was this needed for, and I think the range is really exciting. So yeah, I think the whole concept of the store experience, I think, is key, because I think my impression was there was a kind of view that the high street's declining and everyone's going to be shopping online. But I think people like to go to the shops. People like to, totally. I think COVID's highlighted that even more, that it's great being at home and order stuff, but actually I'd like to go to the store and get that experience. But it might not be just a case of going to store, there's my product, leave. It might be going, and obviously with Strandbags there's an element of travel, so it's looking at where you go and what can you do there, what do you need, kind of thing. So yeah, I think that there's all these, I think it's that innovation in terms of technology, but also ideas for what you can do with the store.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other piece around this is the way that customers dictate largely, and I take your point, we're social by instinct largely. We want to have the physical environment. But what's interesting, and I'll turn to Jasper, is around this space around thinking about the customer experience, Jasper, and thanks for that, Paul. Getting a real lens on that customer is critical to this journey as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the whole concept of endless aisle is to make things a little bit easier for the consumer, right? You don't have to go, if you don't want to, you don't have to go into a store and browse through hundreds of products only to realize that a product's not on the shelf. I think an interesting example is a company like Tesla, right? Where they have a physical showroom, maybe 1 or 2 vehicles. You can go in, have a look, but you ordered the product in store without having to look through hundreds of different models and customize it the way you'd like it. And ultimately that's blurring the line between your physical and your online sites. And again, I think it really gives the consumer that flexibility to choose as to how they want to purchase. I think that's the bottom line.
And one aspect we haven't spoken about, but you've touched on nicely, is this ability to, if you like, really understand with greater larceny customer preferences around social media, the relationship to the brand, the relationship to the purchase, be that endless aisle or otherwise. And that's a key part of a retailer's thinking as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, giving the customer the flexibility to do things digitally is great, but with that comes the catch of, you have to be available online also, right? And like you said, that social media channel, that's massive. We see huge increases in engagement on social media. And if you're a digital brand, you've got to be ready to answer customer inquiries on platforms like Facebook and Instagram. And we see that brands that do that successfully, the revenue numbers don't lie. It's a channel that, when you do engage with your customers, it leaves a positive experience with the customers, and even the negative experiences that you might see online, because at the end of the day, everyone may get a negative engagement or negative customer feedback. Being able to handle that effectively is just as effective in replying to positive engagements, right? So it's definitely a channel that shouldn't be ignored.
And before I pass, thank you very much, Jasper. Before I pass back to Anastasia, Matt, one other question, if I may, that comes to mind, and looping full circle, and Paul may have a view on this. To implement endless aisle, our relationship with our suppliers, by definition, needs to change somewhat, such that we have access to their inventory data. We've got it in real time. So that capital investment, if you like, that you allude to, Matt, is not just for the retailer's domain. It's part of this three-way piece, isn't it? Customer, supplier, retailer.
Yeah, that's right. If you're talking about that kind of almost drop shipping arrangement with your suppliers, it's enablement on both sides. So it's not something you, as the merchant or retailer, can control necessarily on your own. On the other side, on your supplier side, they have to, I guess, expose that type of accessibility for your systems. So if you want to create automatic ordering systems, I guess this is also a bit of a negotiation you might have to do with your suppliers in terms of how the best arrangement would look like. And no doubt the effort required and the investment from the supplier side would only be warranted based on the volumes you're expecting. But yeah, it's really a balancing act and kind of like a multi-touch point project where multiple parties need to come together to make it work.
Absolutely. Paul, do you have any sort of views on that topic around supplier management, supply channel?
Yeah, is that in regard to the data element?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, again, over the 2.5 years I was at Mecca, I ran the program to bring in all the data and to surface that. And I think one of the key things is to have a kind of simplified model. So obviously you've got the Amazon cloud platform, which we used at that time. So if you can get a good way to get data from your internal systems, from suppliers into a data warehouse, and you have a good kind of self-service reporting tool, you can get those insights quickly. So I think that what we found is having access to that data in a simplified way, because obviously you can give someone data in a massive spreadsheet and they can try and work out what's going on, but normally it's a week after it's happened, where the key is to try and get that to people real time, but in a simple way that says, here's a problem, here's why you need to fix it, kind of thing. So I think that, and what we kind of moved to was when we signed a new contract with a supplier, part of that was you need to provide us good quality data in this format. Because obviously, if you do it after the event, you're like, okay, give us your data, and it's all over the place. It's very difficult to integrate. So it's kind of having that discussion up front when you're engaging a new supplier. What data are they going to give you, as opposed to, okay, we've integrated now, what do we get? And it doesn't quite meet the mark.
Yeah, I will pass the questions, but I had another one of our customers, retail CEO, say to me, if you're in the business of widgets and they sell those widgets for under $1, don't worry about endless aisle, because the data washing and everything engaged at that level and the cost to do that makes it prohibitive. Do you have a view on that one?
Yeah, my take on it is, again, that iterative approach. You can start at a very high level. So what are my weekly sales? How many of those am I selling every week? And to me, we learned through kind of trial and error, but trying to do it from the ground up, saying I've got all this data, I want to bring it all in and then I'll work out how I want to use it. I don't think it's the right approach. I think it's more, what's the first question you need to answer? Okay, how do I answer that question? What data do I need? What's your next question? So the first question may be, what do I sell each week in widgets? And you bring that in, and it might be, okay, if you've got different types, okay, I want to split it by type. I want it by month, by day, so it's kind of again, an iterative thing. And I think using a cloud platform like AWS, where you pay for what you use, if you don't use it too much, you don't pay a lot. If you use it a lot, you obviously pay more. So, and I think what we found is that more, it was almost like when we've built this data, that will give the business what they need, and then they see that and go, actually, okay, now I've got another question and another one. So it's continually, I don't think you'll ever get to the point where it's like, okay, there's your data reporting, and then that's it. It's constantly going to be refined, and it's moving more towards like real time. So I think it's given the internal people the ability to react quickly, and even to what Jasper was saying, potentially not even the people reacting, like the system itself dealing with that based on, that's, to me, data underpins a lot of what we're talking about, or else it's kind of, a lot of it's subjective, so it's moving away. And also it kind of gamifies things where it's like, okay, here's my target, how close am I? Can I get past that? And that's obviously driven by good data.
Great answer. Anastasia, and thanks, Paul. I'm going to pass to you now because I noticed there are some questions.
We've got quite a lot of questions in today. So I will start with one for Jasper, or again, anyone who wants to jump in. So personalization and the impact of the changes at Apple and Google and cookies in relate to the impact of increasing levels of privacy. This is something that I've actually come across quite a bit. This increasing levels of privacy now for customers, and the changes in particular with the new Apple operating systems. How do you think that changes the personalization and what you can do as a retailer?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a challenging aspect, right? At the end of the day, you need data to create that personalized experience. If you don't have the data, it's very hard to know who you're speaking with and what their previous habits have been. It's an evolving landscape, and it's definitely challenging. What we try and do is, again, we integrate really well with the platforms, Shopify, BigCommerce, and Magento, right? So in turn, we can integrate with social media. So let's say, I can see this question comes from Brad. Brad has purchased from my site virtually through Shopify. I have that data pooling from Shopify. So that's one way that we can access that data, and I can link that with social media to make that connection. Now, going back to what Matt was saying earlier, like combine that with like a Shopify POS system, that's really that holistic customer experience where if Brad has also purchased something in my physical retail store, again, that pulls through into Shopify as your source of truth. So that's one way that we work around it, where you have that holistic overview, you have one centralized data source. And again, it is challenging with the changing privacy laws, but at the end of the day, the data that you have should allow you to create that personalized experience.
Fantastic. Then I've got a second question here. With a greater range of products, how are shipping costs managed? So in theory, endless aisle leading to more accessory sales, lower AOV, and yet fixed shipping costs. Anyone sort of got some thoughts there?
Yeah, I guess I'll quickly comment on that one. Yeah, in terms of the management of the costs, I think it potentially also comes down to how you want to expose that to the customer. I think there's two sides to it. So if you want to obviously extend the cost to the customer and make it so that they have essentially you're just charging what is needed for that delivery, or there's another train of thought where you just keep the cost of shipping for your customer really simple and have like almost like a flat rate system where, you know, sometimes you lose out, sometimes you win, but it's marginal based on, you know, whatever your strategy is in terms of your product. And I think that's the customer facing side of things. In terms of managing the actual shipping, I think it wouldn't be very different from the way you would manage your online orders. It's just about, you know, thinking of whether or not you're going to fulfill from a different location. So are you fulfilling that from stores, or is it just a centralized distribution center? Yeah, I think it would potentially get influenced by those factors.
Now I've got a question from Wayne. So Wayne, I've unmuted you, so if you want to ask your question, I think it was for Paul.
Hi there. Yeah. G'day, Paul. I just had a question about how, in your experience, you manage situations where you've got inaccurate stock levels at store and or overselling during, say, weekend periods where you've got a high group of casuals, and any strategies you might have put in place to help deal with them.
Yes, I think in terms of that stock or inventory accuracy across systems, so that was a challenge initially when I first joined Mecca. So that, again, that's something that I think Matt touched on it earlier, where there are, say, older systems, and you need to look at basically what the strategy is to move to more modern systems. But I think it was, again, taking things on a case-by-case basis, so making sure there was a regular sync. I think making sure that the warehouse system and the online system had the same stock count, and that obviously that stock was marked as not available as it wasn't available, kind of thing, I think was key. But I think it was, again, taking what looked like a big problem and breaking it down into smaller tasks, and then it led to the point where stock was accurate. So yeah, I think that's a challenge. I think obviously it needs to be real time to stop that completely. So that's something that is working really well at Strandbags, where a lot of the systems are a bit older, but the team have really been on making sure everything's in sync, making sure all the APIs are interacting when they need to, and all the systems are updating, and that's a really robust system, works really well. So my advice would be looking at the problem, taking it piece by piece to try and resolve it, and breaking it down into smaller chunks.
Perfect. Thanks for that question there, Wayne. Still a couple more here. So one, is there currently a preferred ERP system to manage stock for the Shopify platforms for a small retailer?
Yeah, sure. I can comment on that. I guess depending, I guess sometimes it does depend on your product, if it's like a specific type of product, but in general, there's some good platforms like Sin7 or even something like Vend, I think would be good to consider. I can drop some links into the chat in a second, but yeah, those two, I think from a Shopify perspective, it's easy to kind of integrate, and that'll keep things simple, particularly if you're kind of like a smaller to medium retailer just trying to get these types of systems up and running on a basic level.
Fantastic. One question here, is there any particular categories where we think endless aisle is not relevant? And I mean, Brian touched on, small widgets. Is there anything else people think that you'd say, well, it's really not relevant, or do we think it is across the board, and it's at the level of which, as Paul mentioned, the level of which it's relevant? Silence, perfect.
I guess, behind that comment, and it's a great question, is the piece that Paul was touching on, I think, around, face value is the data assembly and the data delineation and dissemination and all the effort going to drive the outcomes. And when we look at some of the numbers that we've seen globally with Ebeltoft, some of the lifts and increases in the accuracy of working capital ratios, increase in sales, it's all case by case, but I'd have to say, as an overarching theme, it's definitely worth the investment. Paul, any thoughts to support or otherwise?
Yeah, I think is this in relation to the data element?
I think so. Yeah, the washing of data and
I think it's key. I mean, I think it drives every department in the business, and without that good insight, you don't really know how you're tracking. Because I've found this through my whole career, where you have good data and you have a target that you think is achievable. It's all, like I say, it's almost gamifying it to say, okay, I want to hit my target. And if you don't believe in the data, so for example, if someone's pulled it together in an Excel spreadsheet and you don't really buy into it, it really doesn't. You miss an opportunity to really mobilize the team. Whereas if you've got data that really is trustworthy and each department agrees that, yeah, these KPIs are fair and this is what we're targeting, then I think it really drives the whole business. But I think also keeping them, not having too many things that you're measuring, because it can then take away from the main targets that you're going after.
And I think, Paul, what I also glean from the question is this piece about possibly having an antiquated point of sale system, antiquated inventory warehouse, and looking at it and going, well, we need a capital X upgrade here of a few $100,000, if that's what it is. versus the benefit of endless aisle to get to that journey. But I think it's also circumstantial, isn't it? And your point around, regardless, you've got to have contemporary data, and you've got to have a culture and a system and a process for maximizing that.
Yeah, that's it. I think even no matter how old the system, you can still get the data out and you can still validate that. And that might mean, I mean, I think if where you do have old systems, if there's things that don't work properly, they obviously need to be fixed. So I think an old system can still run fine, but if it's breaking or it's giving incorrect data, that's something that does need to be fixed. So I think a good first step is to, if there's problems with, say, inventory or those antiquated systems, to fix them before you even think about upgrading. Because if you're trying to upgrade while there's problems in that system, then it's difficult. And I think part of that is making sure you understand the data, you know what it means. And that, I think, like, as you're bringing in the data, a key thing I think to remember is to document it as you bring in, like, what is that? Because it might be something that someone came up with 10 years ago and they've left the business. So I think really digging into what are these metrics that we're tracking, where do they come from, and do we understand them? And then I think people really buy into that. And I think that also then opens up to self-service reporting. So if you can have a good central data warehouse that people can use and interrogate easily, you can then pass that insight building across the business. So basically, there's drag and drop tools like Tableau and Power BI where you can, if you've got access to the data, you can basically derive insights really quickly.
Yeah, and before I pass to Anastasia, the next question, in my mind too, it's linking all this architecture to the ultimate outcome, which is, to Jasper's point, how do I create a differentiated, available anywhere experience, and how do I receive a personalized view? And right at the heart of all this, Paul, at the foundation level, is data, and at the heart level is brand.
Yep.
Two final questions to finish here. So, using endless aisle as a long-term aim to move towards a direct-to-consumer digital model, can we see any threats and opportunities in this?
I can go if.
Please do.
Yes or no? No, I think again it goes into that. What does the customer want? I mean, I think if you're in a shopping mall and you've bought something but you don't want to carry it around with you, how do you conveniently get it to store? And you can also go to the model if someone needs something really quickly, how do you get it to them as quickly as possible? So I think it's having that range of options. So if you don't mind when you get it, obviously it will cost less if you want it immediately or within an hour, within 2 hours. How do you get that? So yeah, I think like I say, I think stores will continue to evolve as, like, obviously costs may be lower now, but they may become higher. So I think it's always that balance of giving a good experience and being able to service the customer wherever they want the product. And I think people are getting a lot more used to things turning up at their door anytime during the day, and I think that's just par for the course now. I think working from home, you see kind of vans driving around all day dropping things off. Like, I'll go out to walk the dog, I'll open the door and there'll be 2 or 3 packages sitting there. So I think it's something people are becoming more and more used to. And I think the stores are more becoming like an experience, a way to really showcase what's our brand all about. And there'll be, I think that's the really exciting part from my point of view as well.
I think that the sort of sibling to that is the role of AI, machine learning, and that's where it gets really interesting. And then you've got this whole piece into the future, is the question asked about who is determining the impulse. Is it the retailer with really judicious AI and good predictive knowledge, or is it the classic model we have now of you or I initiating the impulse and then facilitating it through endless aisle and the like? That's a great conversation for another day, but that's certainly heading downstream as well.
Yeah, and I guess just to comment on the question that before as well. In terms of threats and opportunities, I think it's getting harder and harder to become an expert retailer because of all the different touch points, technology, strategies. I think definitely we do see a movement of suppliers trying to go direct to consumer. But I feel like the advantage or the opportunity that the retailers have at the moment is if they focus on doing the retail side of things really well, the suppliers will always have a need for them to get the volumes that they need or want in terms of goals and growth and whatnot. But yeah, that's just a little thought about that.
Yeah, and I think that, Matt, the rise of a retailer's brand is absolutely the omnipotent beachhead of this.
Yep.
The ability for Strandbags or a Mecca to an emotional core set of attributes and a mindset that's so customer-centric, to Jasper's point. These are just endless aisle, click and collect. These are just tools for enablement. The interesting piece even more interesting piece will be, how do you build that into a proposition that, you know, AI kicks in, you've got all these sort of ways of dealing with customers. And Anastasia's insights show us that even now, customers are increasingly conscious of this, aware of what retailers can do, and then look to their retailer to actually do that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was just going to say just quickly, just on your AI point, Brian, I totally agree with that. I mean, I've used Amazon Personalize at Mecca, and we saw how customers really respond to that. Personalized is recommendations that are based on what the customer's done in the past and what similar customers are doing. So I think there's definitely a whole discussion on that, but it's very, very exciting, and people love it. People want that personal experience. So I don't think they mind too much if it's from a person or it's generated for them, as long as it hits the mark in terms of what they're after.
Absolutely, and Jasper's works at the forefront of that from an online play. So, you know, these are great examples. Anastasia, I think you might have mentioned there's one more question.
Yeah, one final question. Have we got any advice for a new startup retailer of how they want to get into sort of the industry in this endless aisle with endless aisle, AI, all the costs that come with this? Where would we sort of give advice to a new retailer or a retailer fairly early on in their journey about starting this process?
And I'm going to resist the urge to ask them to contact Retail Doctor Group, and I'll pass to our panelists to answer that.
I guess I'll just quickly comment on that. Yeah, it's, as I was saying before, it's potentially an environment at the moment where, you know, it's not necessarily easy to enter the world of retail, but the advantage of what's available today is there are a lot of technologies out there that are trying to make it simple. So less reliance on you having all that upfront capital to set up the digital space you need, the payments, like getting that set up, like all that is much simpler than it's ever been before, even though there is a lot more to offer. Yeah, I would say just definitely do your research up front and don't feel like you necessarily have to overinvest or overextend in areas that obviously are kind of like buzzwords in the market. But it's really about creating good product and making sure your customers want that product. Like that's the crux of it, I think.
Fantastic. All right. Well, fantastic timing there, I think, guys. We've overrun slightly this morning, but I think there's been some great questions, great discussion. So big thank you to Paul, to Jasper, and to Matt for joining us this morning. For everyone that's been listening, like we said, we will record the webinar. It'll be available on Retail Doctor Group YouTube channel, also as a podcast on our Spotify channel within the next couple of days, and Apple and Android. And we'll also send an email out with a download to our white paper that kind of goes into a bit more information about what is endless aisle and what you can do. As always, reach out to us if you've got any questions. So myself and Brian at Retail Doctor Group. I think other than that, just a big thank you to our speakers.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you also, Anastasia, for facilitating this session. You know, there's a lot of work behind the scenes. Matt, Paul, Jasper, great insights, great intel, great sharing of experiences. And really it is about building a retail community that can implement successfully. And this is the purpose of the State of the Nations. So thanks very much, everyone, for your time and your expertise, and to the audience today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.